This MSX episode is partly a big shout out to my friend and podcasting colleague Bob, who introduced 3 out of today's 5 games to me almost 20 years ago when we first started talking about our first computer gaming experiences. However, his memories were more specifically of a computer called Sword M5, which is an obscure Japanese computer that bore similarities to the 16K ZX Spectrum and early MSX and Spectra video models. I've managed to acquire a couple of his recommendations for my MSX, which will now be included as the first 2 games. Both of these games are fairly simplistic, arcade-style games from 1983, developed by Takara, and as far as I know, and from my experience, have barely any difference to their Sword M5 counterparts. First we have Step Up, which is a seemingly simple ladder-climbing game that can challenge you with not only its endless flow of enemies coming from above, but also clunky controls and collision detection. The objective is simply to reach the top of the structure, hop into the small spaceship, and move on to the next similar structure, and avoid more enemies and hazards while getting up. Step Up is clearly related to Donkey Kong, but you get no defense mechanisms of any kind, and gathering bonus score through items is not a thing you need to worry about either. It's exactly the sort of game you might feel massive nostalgia for, if this were part of your childhood. But there is a certain funny kind of cheapness about it that I love in many old games on the ZX Spectrum, C64, Amstrad, and the NES. And of course, the cartridge I have was produced by HAL Laboratory, which I think is pretty amazing. Similarly to the previous, my cartridge of Takara's Dragon Attack is also a HAL Laboratory release, which means that both these cartridges only have their Japanese titles printed on them, as you see. Since I have yet to learn the titles in Japanese, the only way to separate the two from each other is by the title's length. Well, this game is basically a cross between Space Invaders and Centipede. Of course, in both of the originals, you control a device at the bottom of the screen and shoot at things above you, but in Dragon Attack, this idea has been copied almost 100% from Space Invaders. The enemies, which are supposedly dragons, have the appearance of snakes, which drop down similarly to Space Invaders by slithering left and right. You also get special enemies randomly appearing at the top of the screen and flying around through the screen, taking elements from both Space Invaders and Centipede. The main trick here is to shoot the dragon's heads, which will then destroy the entire dragon, but if you shoot one in the middle, it gets split from that point. It's a nice and simple variant on the old fixed screen shooters. Both Step Up and Dragon Attack were, as far as I've been able to dig up, only ever released on MSX and Sword M5, so there's something a bit special about them. Not unique, but not really common either. Now this next game I got introduced to on the C64 when an unexpected conversion of it was released 13 years ago. Hyper Viper is not perhaps one of the most interesting C64 ports out there from this revival period, but it did wake my interest in the original MSX version from 1985, which I have played more since then. Mind you, I still don't have the original in my collection, but that's what these modern SD card devices are for. Anyway, Hyper Viper is basically a mixture of Pac-Man and any old Snake game, with you taking the role of a Pac-Man-like character whose job it is to go around large mazes and devour wandering snakes by eating them from their tail side. If you end up in a snake's frontal area, you will get devoured yourself. There are usually around 5 or 6 snakes in each maze, but there are also other creatures and items that can be eaten, and other creatures that only occupy the mazes in the purpose of killing you. While it's not exactly the most original of ideas, in 1985 it was probably a breath of mildly fresher air in the oversaturated genre of Pac-Man clones. The brilliant thing about Hyper Viper is that the game throws new challenges at you on a regular basis and offers a proper challenge early on. I do like the game on both MSX and C64, so I could recommend either version, but the MSX version is what I've played more since finding it. Game number 4 is another one that Bob likes to mention in connection to Sword M5, another Konami classic called Pooyan, which I could have easily included in either a Nintendo or a C64 episode as well, but there are too many other great games on those platforms, so I could spare this one here. Pooyan is a single-screen arcade shooting game, which is a bit weird to try and explain quickly. You play as Mama Pig, whose babies are being kidnapped by wolves. Your mission is to control Mama Pig in an elevator just next to a cliffside where a bunch of spaces with ladders are to be seen, and you need to keep an eye on the wolves coming in various kinds of waves and drop down the other side of the screen using balloons, and shoot the balloons with arrows to drop the wolves to their death while the wolves try to throw rocks at you. You can also throw meat, which you can pick up from the elevator winch, which the hungry wolves will try to catch and let go of their balloons. If 4 wolves manage to find their way to the spaces with ladders behind you, they can push you off the elevator to your demise. In the second round, the wolves will have kidnapped a number of piglets, and now they will try to get back up to the ledge to push off a large rock to smash you with by using balloons that spawn at the bottom of the screen. There is also a bonus round after every second round, in which your only weapon is the meat chunks you pick up from the elevator winch. That's basically the entire game, with all the usual arcade-style difficulty level advances included. It's a nicely different sort of a fixed shooter, which is nice to get back to every now and then, even if it's easily forgotten in the midst of all the other great fixed shooters. It is worth noting though that Pooyan was created by Fujiwara Tokuro as his first published game, who then went on to work on such classics as Ghosts and Goblins, Commando, Bionic Commando, most Mega Man games since Mega Man 2, most of Capcom's Disney platformers, Resident Evil, and the 2 Tomba games from the first PlayStation. That's a fantastic start for an almost unparalleled legacy, I'd say. Here's another Finnish game to end this MSX episode. Bomulus and the Lost Crown from 1986. The third part of a trilogy of different sorts of games starring a guy called Bomulus, all of them released by Teknopiste. It's the second Finnish MSX/Spectra video game that I ever got to play after Minor Machine, since both of these games were the first ones I could find online. The first 2 parts have lately become available through the website of a Finnish preservation team called Kasettilamerit. I put a link to their website in the video description. Bomulus and the Lost Crown is a flip-screen arcade adventure from a similar perspective as most of Sierra's early adventure games, only much less complex. The only interaction you are even able to do here is pick up items, at least before it's time to exit the castle you are set to roam within. The idea is to find the king's lost crown and deliver it to him, then exit the castle with a password built from letters you have gathered from the scrolls all over the castle. I wrote a somewhat detailed review of this game all the way back in 2017, and even got a comment from Sampo Suvisaari, the game's designer, telling us more about the Bomulus trilogy. Always nice to hear from the designers. To give you a better idea what the game is like to play, I also put a link to my review in the video description, which might be helpful if you feel like wanting to test the game for yourselves. It is a worthy piece of Finnish game developing history, but perhaps not the best overall example of what the MSX and Spectra video computers are capable of.